Hello.
Hello.
We have no viewers yet. It doesn't appear. Let's just wait for a moment.
Oops, I can't hear you now. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Awesome, great. We're just getting some viewers, so I'm going to, in the chat box, invite some people to introduce themselves before we get started. We're going to wait a couple minutes here while people roll in, because at least for those stateside, it's a little bit early. All right. So guys, it's a funny thing when you get more than 10 people because you can't all do a video chat. So if you go toggle to the left-hand side of your Hangout, there is a chat screen on the top left corner. I just put a little chat in there for you. It looks like there are 13 of you guys joining us right now. If you just want to share your name, your organization, maybe and where you're from, it would be great to see who we have so we can make sure we answer things for you. Also, I'm going to give you, if you scroll down, there's also a Q&A section and a link sharing section that we will share. I'll know that you can hear me because you will have added your names to the group chat. Again, this is an experiment that you're all participating in. Strangely, we aren't having anybody respond in the chat bar. If you have any questions during this, if you're having technical difficulties during this presentation, if you just want to email Melanie, I was the one who emailed you last evening. Yeah, I don't know if people can hear me. All right, let me just make sure that chat is enabled. All right. Oh, okay, awesome. Okay, I'm getting, great, thank you. So it looks like you can't respond to the chat. Thanks for being inventive and using the Q&A button. I'm gonna get started now because we're at about 20 viewers. So you guys are using your question and answer toggle. It looks like with chat, it's only Ravi and I who can see it. So again, first time issues, so thank you for being a part of this prototype. I'm gonna do a quick introduction of what we're doing today and then pass it over to my colleague, Ravi, who's gonna share his screen. Just a quick little introduction from me of who I am here at DIG. My name is Melanie Kale, and I am a senior design strategist here out of our New York studio. I come to DIG, which is focused on service and experience design and strategy. Oh, look at all the hellos coming in the questions. You probably can't see it, but it's good to see those. I'm coming from a long background in education and design, mostly based out of urban design and architecture firms, with a lot of focus on organizational design and transformation as it relates to learning and community institutions. And I've been with DIG first as a fellow last year from March until about July, and I've been full-time since this fall. I'm excited for our chat today because we are going to kind of answer some of your questions. We've been really excited about all the enthusiastic replies, both for the India and internship positions. So because we're traveling a lot and have client work, we're not able to have one-on-one conversations with all of you, even though we'd love to pause time and be able to do that. So hopefully today scratches some of that itch and gives you a little insight into DIG and what we do. So with that, Ravi, I'm gonna pass it on to you. Maybe introduce yourself without the screen share, and then we'll go to screen share, or I could share the screen if you want.
Yeah, let me try it. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Really excited that you all are joining us today for this conversation, and hoping that we'll get the chance to work with a few of you later this year. I'm one of the founders and principals at DIG. Started this practice almost 2 years ago in April 2014. Come from a background, quite a diverse background. I spent 10 years at Frog Design before joining DIG, where I led their emerging markets practice in China, in Africa, and in the US. Before that, had a career that took me that involved startups and working in management consultants and private equity firms in a variety of places. And I remember telling myself at that time when I originally left the consulting world that I didn't think I would ever want to come back to this world. And now it's interesting to find that the very design practice that we're trying to create here is one that really relies on our close relationship with a wide range of disciplines that come from our parent organization, Dalberg. And I'll share more about how that works. And then to give you a sense of kind of what our real approach to design is and why we think this approach is so different and has a great potential for impact. So with that, let me just jump in to the presentation. See how we do this here. Can everyone see a screen, PowerPoint slide, cover title slide?
It looks like I can, so I'm guessing people do. If you want to inventively use your Q&A to say, if I just get one yes in the Q&A, I will be happy. And I swear we'll figure this out for the next one. I thought everybody could see the chat toggle. Do we have any Q&A? Can you guys see the slides? Just one person, give me a little shout out. I'm going to assume yes. I have gotten no shout outs, but I have gotten no protesting. Okay. Oh, I just see your picture, Ravi, it says.
You don't see my slide.
Do you see the slide? Not yet.
There's an agenda slide up right now.
Again, thank you for your patience. Do you see Ravi's slides? Not yet, not yet, no. This is tricky. Let me try sharing, Ravi, for you.
Okay, yep. I see your slide.
Okay, so it must be a problem with that. And we will just go to play from start.
Nope, that's back to your face.
Can you see it again?
No, we lost the...
This is so elegant. All right.
There we go.
All right. All right, so Ravi.
Oh, we lost it.
I'll just do this. Can you see it again? This is really frustrating.
Yeah, why don't we just keep it at this slide, not projecting. That's fine.
Okay, sounds good. All right, give it a go.
All right, so let's wanted to just share with you a quick background of what we do at DIG, and then get into some concrete details, give you some examples of the projects that we're involved with, just to give a sense of the types of things that we do. Talk a little bit about what working at DIG is like, and specifically what the roles that we're looking to hire would entail, and then spend some time for Q&A at the end. We've tried, thanks to all of you for sending your questions in advance. We've tried to address most of those questions throughout this presentation, and you'll see we'll call them out as we go along. If we don't get a chance to answer some of them as we go through, please save them for the end, and we'll do what we can to make sure we have time to address anything on your mind. So with that, let's move right ahead into into a little bit of background about DIG. Onto the next slide. So what we do at DIG, the Design Impact Group, is really what we're trying to create is a design practice that is exclusively focused on solving some of the more challenging issues related to economic development, economic transformation, and social impact. Particularly the ones that are affecting underserved communities in developing markets around the world. We know that a lot of these issues, like financial inclusion, right, access to financial services for the poor, or public health, or education, or human rights, or gender empowerment, some of these are very complex issues that don't have easy solutions that can really be brought to life by a single organization or a single actor. These involve complex ecosystems of partners, of private sector, of public sector, of multilaterals, of funders who are all trying to achieve impact in different ways with different objectives. These involve complex kind of behavioral and societal ecosystems where you have people who have a wide range of needs that are influenced and motivated in different ways. And often these are in environments where it's difficult to come up with an idea and just bring it to life in the way that we may attempt to do so in the private sector. And so a lot of the challenges of operating in this environment really led us to build DIG over the past almost 2 years. And moving to the next slide, kind of the real model that we're trying to use is one in which we of human-centered design, take the power of kind of related creative disciplines like design thinking, like innovation strategy, like systems thinking, and embed that or situate that within a more robust set of capabilities that we believe are required to achieve impact. And specifically, we're really fortunate to have our parent company, Dalberg, be a part of us in this journey. So for those of you who don't know Dalberg is a management consultancy or strategic advisory firm. It's about 300 people. That's originally founded out of management consulting roots. I came out of a McKinsey background and has evolved over the years to create a set of capabilities that are all oriented towards helping organizations achieve impact. And so we see some of the key capabilities that Dalberg brings to the table are, of course, a strong kind of business strategy lens, advisory and policy influence, measurement and evaluation to really understand kind of the impact of anything of any intervention. Innovative financing to ensure that there are ways to bring funding into environments where funding does not exist. Right, and all of these capabilities are quite important in the development sector and help us create a foundation in which we can place design as something that can push those ideas even further. I think one of the key learnings that from my time frog is that it's rare that we're working with an organization where you can use a creative process to give a company a single idea and then have them take it to life on their own. There needs to be much more support, active engagement of partners, active engagement of funders, changes at the policy level, a commitment to constantly measure and evaluate. And all of this needs to happen in concert. And that's really the principle and the fundamental belief of what DIG is doing, is that design needs to be integrated to be able to achieve the impact we're looking to achieve. The way we're building out this model is essentially to take advantage of the presence of our parent organization and create a distributed design team across the globe. So right now, we have a presence in 3 locations. I'm based in London. Melanie's based in New York. We also have a team in Nairobi. We're about a dozen or so people right now, full-time, plus, a half dozen kind of long-term, kind of partners who we work with regularly. And we're planning to open up an India presence this year as well. Each of these locations is a place where Dalberg also has an office themselves. And so we work hand in hand with our colleagues who are strategists, who are researchers, who bring a variety of expert capabilities in M&E and financing and operations, et cetera. And we're able to use that kind of combination of a distributed footprint and a larger team in combination with our specialist designers to essentially have quite a broad footprint. So we've been able to do work in 19 countries, 5 continents over the course of the last year and a half. And really, as we look at the year ahead, our work is continuing to kind of spread into Latin America, all across Africa, Southeast Asia, and then kind of being accompanied by a core baseline of work in Europe and the US as well. So what is it exactly that we do? I think we describe our work as really being rooted in human-centered design. And I'm pretty sure everyone on this who's joining us for this conversation is familiar with human-centered design at a high level, but let me just kind of talk through some of the key principles that we believe are really important in our work. So of course the notion of listening to users, using user insights and needs as inspiration for ideas, that's not rocket science. It's been around in some shape or form for arguably hundreds of years, right? But what at least the modern take on HCD, I think, really did mature in the private sector, where you'd see some very developed very competitive sectors like financial services or healthcare or consumer electronics, where you have companies moving very quickly and looking for that slight edge based on a behavioral pattern or a need that you could convert into a design solution that will give you an edge over your competitors for perhaps a limited time until they catch up, right? And I think this is what we see often in the private sector in companies like Apple and Disney and Intel and others. What's interesting is many of the approaches that we use to understand needs and rapidly turn them into solutions is also very relevant when we then go to the kind of bottom side of this diagram, when we think about the underserved, right? Those whose needs are not known at all, those for whom we have very little information about how they behave, and this applies to most of the world, right? When we think about dealing with or solving problems of smallholder farming in Africa or public health in India, we're often talking about populations about whom we have very little knowledge, or not nearly as much knowledge as we'd like to think we have. And so, one of the I think the interesting trends that we've started seeing is that in the development space in particular, there's started to become a real appreciation for the power of human-centered design, specifically because of this ability to focus on needs. If you jump to the next slide, one of the quotes we like to point to all the time is from Melinda Gates from the Gates Foundation, who makes a point that about how important human-centered design is, and something that she's increasingly trying to bring into their initiatives across the world. And a few key points that she kind of hones in on that I think are very relevant to what we're doing. Firstly, this notion of meeting people where they are. How do you actually, the principle of human-centered design, of course, is to put people at the center. But to do that, how do you, where do you start? And I think from our perspective, we still feel, we firmly believe that you can't really easily ask people these questions through conventional research. We need to make the effort to go where people are, spend time in their communities, spend time in their homes, on their farms, in their outhouses, as you see here. And a lot of the research that is at the core of what we'll do is very immersive in spirit, right? It has a lot of draws on ethnographic research and qualitative research approaches, but it's based on the premise that you can't start a conversation about understanding people's needs, or you can't claim to understand people's behaviors and motivations until you actually are in their environment. Bringing people to you is not going to be effective. And so we do spend a lot of time in the field. We travel to the places where we want to have impact. And I think for a lot of our team, that's one of the most exciting things, parts of the work. The next question is, once we're there, is how do you understand people's needs? It's not as simple as asking questions. At times, questions, of course, will give you useful answers. But when we're talking about issues of people's personal health or their financial futures or how they think about their kids, these are often very sensitive topics, and we need to spend a lot of time building relationships, building trust, and try to untangle what often will be a very competing and challenging and kind of contradictory set of responses and about needs, right? So, needs change over time, needs change in context, and we only may be in an environment in a limited period of time. And so we have to use many methods. We have to go back repeatedly. We have to really commit to the communities that we want to work with, and not just fly by, but really spend time engaging with them and working with them to understand their needs in a real enough way where we can feel confident in the solutions that we come up with. Once we have that foundation, then we can take it in many places. And that's, I think where the design and strategy process really picks up, right? And so we'll be thinking about new solutions. We could be creating a mobile app. We could be creating a new service. We could be creating a new program for a donor. All of those go through an iterative, rapid prototyping, iterative design process where you test many ideas and bring them to life. Based on the feedback you receive. We can go through a process of using the outputs of our research and our prototyping to bring communities together, to help inspire partnerships, to think about messaging, and to think about how influencing policy. So there are many kind of implications at the strategy and kind of programmatic and policy level that we can then start layering around the core set of insights and ideas that emerge. So that's the core kind of principle of how we look at HCD. In terms of what it means, there's a variety of methods. As I mentioned, a lot of upfront research, right, to understand needs and behaviors. Eventually, we get into a design process, and right now we're open to kind of all types. We engage in all types of design, whether it's products and services, whether it's programs, whether it's strategies, and then of course going through all types of prototyping and co-creation and participatory approaches to bring these solutions to life, and then making sure that they can scale requires a lot of deeper kind of engagement with communities, awareness building, demand generation, communications, and all of that is also part of what we do. So, wanted to, one of the questions I think that came up here that I think I addressed is the intersection we have with Dalberg, and this is I would say in general we believe that the integrated approach is fundamentally important to the work that we do. So almost all projects that we do will involve our colleagues at Dalberg in some way. Some may lean more heavily on our own team because they're a little bit more design-led, and some are much more kind of strategy-led or financing-led, and those may lean more heavily on our colleagues at Dalberg, and some are quite mixed. And so there are many types of models that exist within Dalberg, but in general, we're collaborating very closely with the rest of the organization.
And one thing I'd add to that, Ravi, is that especially here in the New York office, and I know in Nairobi as well, and in London, which is a growing studio, there's a lot of goodwill. There's a trend of design studios and management consulting firms pairing up, and I think the origin story of how Dig and Dalberg came to be partners really allows for this organic way that Dig also helps influence the larger culture and strategy of Dalberg as a whole. So we get a lot of cross-pollination outside of project work whether it's, we helped redesign the office space here in the New York studio. We often are tapped to help strategize their working sessions or stakeholder engagement processes. And so I think some of those things are also really rewarding in the work. And so I know that the intern program in the summer, especially, there's also cross-pollination with people that are temporarily in the studio, both in the Dig studio and Dalberg studio.
Great, thanks, Melanie. So let's keep moving on. Let me give you some concrete kind of project examples just to bring some of this theory and positioning to life. So I wanted to quickly walk through 3 examples to give you a sense of some of the different things that we do. So the first is some work that we've done in the agriculture space with a social enterprise called MyAgro. MyAgro is a small startup in West Africa, based in Mali, now moving into Senegal. And they have, one of the problem that they're trying to, the challenge that they're trying to solve is that many smallholder farmers, which are the smallest of farmers, which represent over 3 billion people kind of in the world right now, who are essentially just subsistence farming. And in this case, in parts of West Africa that are very dry, limited ability to grow richer cash crops, many farmers are growing peanuts. And peanuts are a difficult crop to grow. And so they've come up with a solution that allows people to purchase higher quality inputs, meaning higher quality seeds and fertilizer, which they obtain in bulk at a discounted rate, and then provide that to their farmers, who can then get a better harvest, because there's also training and kind of other types of services around those core inputs, and therefore that leads to more farm income and better farm productivity. Now, the challenge is that most farmers cannot even afford to purchase a small package of inputs. It's just these are farmers who are making less than $2 a day, and it's a very difficult to save up for even as little as $10 or $15. And so the model of MyAgro is to use a mobile system with cards similar to the top-up cards maybe you've seen in some kind of in many developing countries for your phone airtime. You essentially purchase a small 1,000 franc contribution to your 10,000 franc package. And you can purchase that every week and register with your mobile phone. It taps into this great existing behavior. People do this already to buy airtime for their phones. So now you're essentially allowing farmers to use the same behavior to purchase, to make installment payments or towards a package of inputs. So we've been, the overall platform works well. We've been helping them extend the platform by bringing in elements of a loyalty system, by bringing in some additional mobile and IVR-based tools for agents and vendors to better serve these farmers, and essentially finding a way to turn farmers into repeated customers, not only for the purpose of course, helping MyAgro grow, but fundamentally for the purpose of inculcating more responsible financial habits, getting people to save in a small incremental way, right, through through this mechanism, as opposed to asking farmers to do this just because it's a way to get better inputs. This is a classic kind of conventional, let's call it HCD project, in the sense that the ultimate goal is to come up with a solution that involves a mobile service, it involves a loyalty program, it involves some technology tools, it involves a series of components. But we went through a process of 7 weeks of immersive research in Senegal, over the course of 11 weeks, where a team was, working and embedding themselves in local communities and farms, really understanding needs, behaviors, motivations, going through rounds of rapid prototyping, and then coming up with these solutions, and eventually converging on a few that made the most sense. In parallel, we're taking advantage of our colleagues within our strategy team at Dalberg. We're modeling the costs of the distribution network, coming up with the business plans, making sure that this can be viable and technically feasible. And now we've actually just moved into a piloting phase where we're taking some of the most compelling solutions to life. The peanut season is actually starting in 2 weeks, and we're going to be testing these new ideas over the course of the season, and we'll see the impact that they've achieved by summer, right? So it's an example of over the course of a year going from a pretty open-ended problem on how to drive behavioral change, coming to a solution, prototyping them, piloting them, and we'll see what the impact is a little bit later this year.
Awesome, thanks, Ravi. And so one project I'm going to share is a little bit about our work with CGAP, which is an organization within the World Bank that stands for the Consultative Group to Assist the Poor. So it's their focus group funded by a variety of banks and financial service providers and foundations about bringing financial inclusion to the most needy through a variety of strategies, whether that be digital tools or just best practices in the microfinance and banking community. The projects that we've worked on, a lot of projects with CGAP, so I would say it's an example of a long-standing relationship in which we get to touch many different parts of the organization. But the one I'm going to share a little bit about today is our work with their customer experience toolkit. Some of our work is product and service related, like the project Ravi shared with you with MyAgro that goes even to a active prototyping and piloting phase. And this is an example of us as capacity builders within this space, giving tools and resources to promote larger, it's a more meta project. It promotes larger capacity building within organizations. So this project started with aggregating all of the work that CGAP has done to bring customers to the center. So one thing that you should know about financial inclusion is not only is it hard to get financial products to the poor, products and services to the poor, but it's really hard to get products and services to the poor that work, that fit their needs. So CGAP has embarked on a path in which they've created some kits to bring a human-centered design to designing financial services as well as other programs. So we were engaged to create a larger toolkit that took a lot of these resources and helped a bank say, okay, how do we bring customer experience, something that, you know, Southwest Airlines, Virgin Airlines, many of the stores that we get to go to, they're really focused on the customer experience and not just the product. How do we get customer experience into these banking institutions so that they can design better products and services to the poor? So we've created a workbook and a website. It's going to be a part of a larger website launch that helps banks do this, and MFIs as well as MNOs, mobile network providers, MFIs, microfinance institutions. And this was also paired with CGAP does demonstration projects in which they test and deepen their research. So we worked with Jana Lakshmi, with our Dalberg team, to actually help their mid-level their senior management has bought into the idea of bringing customers to the center of their practice and incorporating new research. But this was a project to identify prototypes that this small urban microfinance institution in Bangalore, that's headquartered out of Bangalore, India, and spread throughout the country, how to help them do prototypes of new customer experiences, everything from how do they make their branch offices more comfortable for mothers and children, to designing an incentives program for one of their group savings products. And so we helped them actually set up and design prototypes that they then ran within their organization and are picking which ones to scale. So half of it was a meta project of aggregating resources, and half of it was a demonstration project to deepen those resources as well as try them out hand in hand with a financial service provider.
Thanks, Melanie. And I think what's interesting about these two examples is they do reveal kind of two approaches to how we see the industry really trying to achieve impact. There are always going to be kind of leader organizations or whether it's the social enterprise, whether it's the dominant bank in a country, whether it's the school system of a district, that are the ones where we believe there's potentials for innovation. And if we work with them, alone, work with only them. There's by really aligning our solutions closely with their strategy, helping them make change, there is a great chance for them to achieve impact, or a greater chance for them to achieve impact, and also a greater chance for them to take a leading role in their own ecosystem, right? Often competitors will follow suit, other companies will copy, and all of that kind of helps scale indirectly the impact that is achieved by working with one of them. So that's kind of one useful direction. At the same time, there are many organizations that are not ready to embark on these types of product strategies, or not ready to embrace innovation in the same way that some of these larger organizations or these first movers are. And so, can we create tools? Can we create playbooks? Can we create guides? Can we help with their own capacity building, so that the lessons learned and the best practices that exist in the organizations that are driving the change can also be adapted and employed and brought into a broader set of contexts? So allows us to kind of go deep with one and also broad across others. And I think we're seeing a nice balance across our work and the upcoming work, where to serve kind of both of those needs in the market. A third example that I wanted to give you, just as a very different take, is work we're doing with the Africa Development Bank. They're one of the large multilateral development agencies based in Abidjan that is essentially serving the entire continent. They have a very bold ambition to create 100 million jobs for youth over the next 10 years. Right, and of course, I think, as we all appreciate, the unemployment in many developing countries for people over the age of 12 has many significant repercussions, whether it's economic development, whether it's militarism, whether it's general kind of instability that you see in communities. There's jobs, education, employment, entrepreneurship are all kind of very important to kind of addressing some of those issues. And so, this is part of a much larger kind of multi-year effort we're engaged in with our strategy colleagues to really think about the largest scale or large impact approaches to creating jobs. And so, is it around developing an ICT capability, right, that will allow younger people to develop kind of computer science and technology skills to compete in the modern world? Is it about industrialization, right? Allowing people to more easily partake in the building of Africa that's taking place in terms of roads and construction and just kind of general infrastructure development? Is it about agriculture, right? Which is, of course, such a major part of the economy, but it's still very much informal in feel, right? People don't have access to markets, access to inputs, access to all of these ingredients that are necessary to allow agriculture to scale into something more commercially sustainable, right? So a key part of this effort is, let's run youth workshops and kind of use some human-centered design and participatory approaches to understand what are the real challenges and opportunities from the youth perspective, and then complement that with more of a strategy-led approach, where we really look for global best practices and really model out what are the fastest pathways to scale for different countries. Because Rwanda may do it differently from Mozambique, may do it differently from Egypt, right? And so I think that melding together the kind of human-centered perspective, which gives rise to many creative ideas and helps us understand and segment the youth in a more rigorous way, with that kind of top-down or strategy-led perspective that allows us to really understand what it takes to transform some of these countries and create very rapid, large-scale impact, is quite powerful. And this is a model that I think we're increasingly finding that we can bring into many of larger development organizations that are trying to achieve kind of impact across countries, or in a more broadly scalable way. So those are the three. I think over the course of these three examples, we covered most of these questions. I think maybe I'll just tackle the last one about impact. This is a really big question and an important one. Of course, in this sector, it's not as easy to measure impact as in the commercial sector, where you just have customer acquisition or dollar numbers to point to. There's not an easy answer to this either. Maybe the cute answer is that we measure impact in the way that our clients do, and our clients use different definitions, and we're generally trying to support our clients in their own ability to measure impact, because that's how they grow. At the same time, we do have a measurement and evaluation practice that does look at this quite seriously, and we try to ensure that when we're doing kind of work across sectors or work across a single country, where you often have different initiatives and programs that are intersecting, can we look for some common threads and think about how we can invest in measuring impact on a more systemic or at an ecosystem level. And so there are, different answers at different times, and I'd say in some cases we are able to measure impact quite concretely, and in some cases it's much more difficult, and that's part of that. I think that's the challenge of operating in this space in general.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the nice things too about being within Dalberg. As Ravi mentioned, we have an M&E practice, and so we have some of the sharpest minds who really do that translation from initiatives to potential outcomes to what do you have to measure to get those outcomes. So occasionally we bring those people in to think about its integration into our work, as well as just influenced by Dalberg as a whole, who's very sensitive to that ongoing conversation and very proactive with even not just measuring impact in the field, the actual work out in country, but in the organizations it transforms and their perceptions of our work's transformative power in that way. So anyway.
Great. Okay, so let's move quickly to the last section, what you're all here for. Let's talk about some of the opportunities and talk about our team and what that's like. Go to the next slide. Oops, that image didn't come out right. But in any case, that's a picture of some of our team members at a retreat we had in New York last year.
I don't know what happened to that, Ravi.
I don't know what happened to that either. But I think we have a really diverse team, and this is something that I think personally is something that I'm so excited about, and I've really enjoyed kind of seeing how our team has evolved. We have people who are come from a very, let's say, come from a background that has afforded them some deep expertise in a specific area, whether it's graphic design or industrial design or research. We have people who have had a more diverse kind of generalist experience and have been able to use and employ design in a variety of places. And we have people who you maybe wouldn't call designers if you looked at their CV or resume, in that they come from maybe business backgrounds or hybrid backgrounds. They wouldn't necessarily have a portfolio in the way that a designer would. But what's common across everyone, and I think one of the reasons we exist within Dalberg is that we are creative thinkers, right? And we bring in an approach to problem solving that is different from the strategy-led, answer-first kind of hypothesis-driven approach that is, let's say, the standard kind of mode of problem solving in a lot of this space and in the broader development and impact space. And so that means, of course, a real ability to kind of practice the human-centered design process in terms of having the right empathy, the right notion of collaboration, the ability to kind of think iteratively and quickly. All of that is, of course, important, and having some technical design skills is, of course, helpful. But fundamentally, it's about creative problem solving, and that's what we see in everyone in our team. At the same time, we're also a small practice, right? We're almost 2 years old, and we're growing quickly, but we're in some ways a startup. And we're kind of still being, incubated and kind of trying to find the best way to kind of operate in this space. And I think all of you are, if you haven't worked in a startup, you're probably all aware of what it takes to work in a startup. You have to be able to, think rigorously. You have to be able to get your hands dirty and just make it happen. You need to be able to work with many types of people. You need to be able to, occasionally fight the fights to make your message clear. You need to be able to push your ideas through. So we definitely have that kind of younger studio startup entrepreneurial feel, and we want people who can thrive in that environment and who are initiators and kind of self-starters and hard workers, while at the same time bringing kind of a true kind of creative problem-solving talent, whether whatever kind of whatever domain it's been applied to in their past life.
Yeah, and one thing I would say too is this picture isn't an accident. This is Kristen Schlott, who was an intern with us last summer, and this is her doing field work in. I don't remember this. Is this Mayagro field work? No, in Marsabit.
Exactly. This is in Kenya.
Yeah, so this is in Kenya, and she now is in our Nairobi studio, and did some contract work with us, and we have this great group of folks that come from a variety of backgrounds. I think her background was a lot in information design, and had worked in some startups, including worked with some folks at internet.org, and so this is. She's with our team and has worked now in New York and Nairobi. And so it gives this nice balance where we cross-pollinate across the studios as well.
Exactly. So actually, Melanie, you want to just kind of continue and talk us through some of the...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll get into in each of the job descriptions, there's very detailed qualitative and experience-led kind of check marks to think of for each of the current open opportunities. But as Ravi mentioned, that a lot of things that we share isn't necessarily our background, but kind of our biases towards getting things done, collaborating with one another. Everybody, even if they're not a communication designer, is a very clear storyteller and listener to stories. And it always thinks of themselves as evolving their HCD practice, whether they're at the more beginning stage of that journey or later on. So the two positions we have right now, and if you want to start putting any questions that you might have, I'm going to answer a few technical questions about the applications at the end of this, but if you want to start putting any questions that you have in the Q&A section, it gives Ravi a chance to look at some of those for the last 10 minutes here. But the two roles that we have open right now are the DIG India Creative Lead that we alluded to, and the DIG Design and Strategy internship for this summer. So I'll talk through a little bit of that. Ravi, actually, do you want to talk through the India lead, and I'll go into the internship in just a moment?
Sure. So I think for the India lead, as mentioned, we started out in London and New York. We expanded to Nairobi this past year, and now we'd like to anchor our presence in India. We have a large Dalberg office in India already. It's about 40 people, and they cover a lot of our work in that region, and also more broadly in Southeast Asia and a little bit of East Asia. And so this person would be relatively senior in that they'd be comfortable kind of being the representing the DIG brand. And eventually growing a team around them. I'd have to be comfortable kind of embedding themselves within a larger consultancy or a larger group of 40 plus people, and which takes a certain personality. Let's say it is there needs to be kind of an ability to kind of communicate and interface with colleagues who have quite a wide range of backgrounds. Right, so people who are strategists, who are researchers, who are entrepreneurs, as part of that broader Dalberg Mumbai family. And so it is. We recognize that this is it will be a pretty unique kind of a remarkable individual, right? Who could kind of be at that level that can kind of interface with the strategy organization and build a team, while also we're small, so this is also needs to be someone who's willing to get involved in a detailed way on project work and run projects and oversee delivery.
Wonderful. And if you have any specific questions related to this role, again, pop them into that Q&A section. And if you are not interested in this role, but you know somebody or know some organizations that might have some great candidates, please feel free to forward on if you do. Our personal referral network is a great way to find great folks. So the second, which I know a majority of you are interested today, is the DIG Design and Strategy internship roles. Some of the basics are that we make this a graduate level internship preferred. That's the most traditional channel that we have and kind of matches up with the interns that we get at Dalberg as a whole. But we do review a range of candidates who have 2 to 4 years of experience or a little bit more, or are not part of a traditional graduate program per se, but maybe a part of a fellowship or a certificate, or recently out of one of those and wants to have a kind of hands-on learning experience with our team. We are looking for a candidate for each of our offices, at least one candidate for each of our offices, and in our existing studios. And most of these studios will also have Dalberg interns. So we will connect you to some of that programming, whether that be skill building or just socially connected to that programming, just to provide you a larger support network. There are 2 types of projects really that this intern role engages in. One is, those client-based projects that you saw above. Kristen did everything from jumping right in to visualizing system maps to creating paper prototypes for the CX Toolkit website that we tested with FSPs, to coming to workshops in DC, and acting as a small group facilitator. She dove right in. I don't know if there's any highlights from Charlotte's internship that you want to share, Ravi.
Yeah, Charlotte was one of our interns last year in London. On our first day, she was able to join us in New York for the summit that you saw the picture of a few slides previously. But then she really focused on one project that we were working on in Tanzania. And that took up most of her time. So she had the chance to go spend a few weeks in Tanzania with our team, working on some merchant payment solutions and prototypes. And then she also helped out with a few internal initiatives as well in her spare time.
Awesome. And so client work is a big part of that portfolio, as are some studio projects. Kristen was a big champion of, as we're in a startup mode, we had a few systems that needed building, like how we organized pictures and media, or other initiatives between DIG and Dalberg. And so being curious about what it takes to build a studio and a collection of studios in the practice is a great bias to have. I know in my fellowship, I helped lead, because I worked in architecture and planning for a while, I helped lead the redesign of the office that's been used as kind of best practice across Dalberg. So seeing the cultural impact of that work can be rewarding in a very similar way to projects. And so somebody with an organizational curiosity is also great to have. The application is due 2/21, and you should be able to load everything up there. I know that there are some questions about, I wanted to share a little bit about portfolio. There are some of you who don't have a traditional design portfolio. You're not necessarily background as designers or technical engineers or anything. But anybody, that wasn't, a lot of people come to us with that practice. I think the thing that connects them is that they view the work that they've done, not just as a role they had as an organization, but a collection of projects and problems that they solved. And so it can be easy to pull together a few visual examples and tell the story of the project you solved, how you solved it, the role you played, and kind of the outputs and impact. And if you even use a collection of screenshots or images of some of that work and also the process that got you there, we can get insight to you as a thinker and communicator and doer. You don't have to worry as much about the actual design of what that portfolio is. Ravi, any other tips on that? I know that last year there was a few questions. We really liked to know the role that people played, especially if you're on a complex project, so that we can understand what your skill set is. So you might have worked with a graphic designer, but you were doing the business modeling. we would want to know that about your skill set. That if we saw something really, really pretty and polished, that perhaps you might not have been the graphic designer, but you worked hand in hand with that person and worked on another part of that project. That is helpful to us to know. Let's see, anything else? I'm going to quickly look at your questions. And okay, concrete examples of how design and strategy interns. I think we covered that. Sometimes I think the one challenge that can happen is that internships don't necessarily fall within client project cycles. It's not a one-to-one fit. And so sometimes you join things midstream and you might be playing more of a support role to get your feet wet. Other times a project is in its launching phase and you get to be there really through project conception. Because of the rhythm of our work, we can't guarantee where exactly you would be in that process, but know that we're very mindful at the beginning of these projects to, in a series of formal and informal conversations, work with you to identify what your goals are and what learning experiences you want to have, and then whether we can do that through, accommodate that through the projects that we have online at that time, absolutely, or if we can connect you with, in some mentoring relationships, or through other shadowing experiences, we're going to do our best to think of this as a collaborative co-learning process. And I think it answered some of the questions about the non-traditional or non-technical people. So any other additions? Otherwise, we should go to a quick Q&A, Ravi. I know we're a little bit over time, so let's maybe have 5 to 7 minutes for that.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's move right to the Q&A. Nothing more to add.
I am going to stop presenting, stop my screen share. Oh, Miriam, Ravi, if you want to become visible too. If you want to pick a question to start, I'm going to...
Sorry, I don't see the questions.
If you toggle to the Q&A section on the left-hand side of your screen, Ravi, do you have that?
I don't.
Okay, well then I will...
Why don't you pick a question?
I will pick some questions to answer. Let's answer this one. Ravi, can you see the question or no? Could you briefly explain about the dig setup in India by Vidhi Mehta?
Well, so right now there is no dig set up in India, right? We were looking for our first hire to anchor our dig presence. We would anticipate that right now that this person would be kind of embedded into our team of about 45 or so people within the larger Dalberg practice, and could tap into a network of additional designers to support any immediate project work. We would anticipate that over the course of the next year, we would continue to invest in the India studio in the same way that we've grown Nairobi. And so you would be, let's say, alone at first, but with a real commitment to kind of being able to grow it based on your relationships with the people in the team and the types of work that come in.
Awesome. I'm going to answer this because I think it helps clarify some things. I feel the question is, I'd like to know what is the progression from internship to management actually like? Alternatively, where does someone with limited interest in design but interested in strategy find a place? We are hiring for more design strategists, so people more with a design bias. So if you had a spectrum of design and strategy, we're going to want you to be somewhere in the middle of that rather than fully just on the strategy side with no interest in design methodologies. Dalberg does have a management consulting internship for people who are wanting to work in a more traditional but yet really socially minded management consulting role. However, we have Dalberg colleagues that have kind of become a part of our extended DIG family, working on several projects with us over time. And they may come from a traditional MBA program or see themselves more as a management consultant, but really wanting to build that toolkit. And I think we're interested in some of, in having those more strategy-minded consultants, but it really, the selection of, I wouldn't necessarily see this as a progression. I think that's probably a misnomer. and or a misunderstanding, and that the selection of how many more generalists or strategists or research-led people versus technical designers is really going to depend on, it's not necessarily you, it's the mix of projects we have coming in and the skills that we'll need, the balance of the office needs at the time with other skill sets that might be needed to make a particular location thrive. And your experience with different levels of work. So there's probably a few different levels that we're going to be looking at these applications, and we will respond to some of you with this might not be the right time for you, but we'll keep in touch. And that's because, the fit at the time isn't right, but not that you aren't a great candidate. And let's see. Are you willing to take on a fresh graduate with less than 2 years of work experience, but internship experience? I think it depends. We've seen we don't like to be too discriminatory. I do think one of the main challenges is that a lot of programs are very theoretical. A lot of more traditional programs are very theoretical. And people may not have experience working either in client situations or in even the context that we work in, program and services that we work, and thus aren't able to immediately add value when they join. We like to take people who are, obviously everybody's information, every one of us has learning goals within the Dig Studio, but we often say less than we look for graduate level interns or 2 to 4 years of work as a base, just so we know that people can dive right in to an agile startup team that does client-based delivery work in very different contexts in a mature and impactful way right away. Let's see. Let's see. Day-to-day journey and activities, I think we covered a little bit of that. You'll participate in some of our weekly check-ins, so you get a feel of the whole studio. You can join our lunch and learns or programs at the Dalberg offices, in addition to whatever the project demands are, which can be anything from leading a workshop to designing prototypes to sometimes just sorting through images to make the best image library, which is not going to be your main job at all, or designing graphics or information for presentations. If you're still developing your skills, we'll try to connect you with the resources that we have, both in mentorship and online, and do a lot of coaching. But it's okay if you're, I think, a bias towards learning and willing to get your hands dirty and jump in. I've seen, Kristen, for example, her skills, especially in graphic design, and information design, really flourish since she's been with the Dig team, and it's been incredible to see that. And it's because she had a bias to jump in and ask questions and do things that got her to where she is.
I would just add that another, what's nice about, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yep. I was going to say that what's nice about being a small studio and or a small series of studios that is connected as one team is that we could also be a little bit fluid across our work. So the example that I mentioned previously with the Africa Development Bank, which does have a core team working on it, the nature of the work also allows other team members to jump in a one-off way to run a workshop with youth in one location or do a little bit of research in another location. So we're giving a lot of people on our team exposure to that project, because of the way that we've structured it or somewhat templatized it in a way that could be replicated in different environments. I think we're always looking for those types of opportunities because it's valuable to us to be able to draw into all of the creative talent of our team, not just a core team that we've dedicated to a project. And so there are ways to bring people in to work on things with other team members in other locations, or provide input on provide some design input on someone else's work, or help with a little bit of prototyping that's happening on a different project. You'll find there's always a little bit of fluidity there, and so you'll get a chance to get your hands dirty with not just the core work that you're working on, but other things going on as well.
Okay, a couple quick questions. I'm going to fire off these last three, and we're going to try to do them relatively quickly. If you've asked a more technical question, we'll try to save them and answer them on a one-off basis. The first, which is pretty easy, is, are your interns self-directed, highly managed, or somewhere in the middle? Somewhere in the middle, option C. However, I feel like it's really important for people to both balance times when there might be more self-directed moments, or might be need for more coaching, depending on the level of stakes of a particular project or sensitivity of a particular project. Self-direction can be really great in terms of, like, we want to know the projects you're interested in working on, and if you can fit that in as well, and if we can support that, or if you have ideas for how the studio can improve, in that way of self-directed but self-motivated to be a problem finder and doer. We love those people, and people who are good at taking feedback. I think that was one of the most valuable experiences while I was in fellowship before joining full time. Was really loving the opportunity to get really robust feedback on my work, and that's not necessarily a highly managed thing, but just the culture of a design studio. So I hope that answered. The two last ones are, how might service design be valuable to DIG? I feel like we answered this. A lot of the things that we do are designing products, services, or programs. But Ravi, if you have any other comments about why service design?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's definitely a very important part of what we do. I would say we do have people such as Ashish, one of our team members in London, who comes from a service design background. I would say other people on our team have practiced service design approaches, or have used some of the kind of classic tools of service design in their work, even though it may not necessarily be called that. But overall, I think the fundamental principles of service design do apply across a lot of our work.
Okay, and then the last one is, how relevant is field experience in developing countries and BOP sector? Ravi, do you want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah. I think it's not a requirement that you must have spent X amount of time or done this type of work in the field in developing countries. I think in general we would love to see some familiarity with these markets and some exposure to kind of working in these places. We know that often the working environments there are quite different and can be challenging, and knowing that you're comfortable stepping into places like that is of course helpful and gives us a lot of confidence that we could throw you into all types of work. That said, there's definitely people on our team who have a very wide range of kind of experience working kind of in field in that way, and I would say that the overall attitude of being kind of curious and driven and kind of wanting to explore new places and cultures, that's almost more fundamental, right? If you have that real passion for impact, for that real passion for discovery, then we'll likely see that come through in how you present yourself and in how you talk about your work, and that's going to be really valuable for us. So in short, it's not an absolute requirement.
Yeah, my background is more domestic here in the States in urban design and education, and I found that some of my knowledge about how funding organization works, or other kind of nonprofit organizational knowledge was very useful, even if it wasn't strictly in the developing sector. Also looking at the diversity of projects in the communities that you've worked with, whether or not it's in a developing context, and seeing those differences and how you approach them in your process is also very important. So again, just echoing that from Ravi. Ravi, I think we're done. We went a little bit over. There were some technical difficulties. We prototyped it, but with only invited folks, not not a full public thing. So we're just learning about some of these snafus that come from a full live hangout. But thanks for coming along for the ride and being so responsive on email and the Q&A section. You guys were awesome. But any final words of wisdom, Ravi, from London?
Yeah, thanks very much for joining. We really encourage you kind of all to apply. Definitely feel free to reach out as you've done already if you have follow-up questions. If you want us to, if we didn't get to anything that's really on your mind, and happy to kind of keep this conversation going through other virtual channels in the upcoming weeks. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. It's been great to chat, and have a good week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.